Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome everyone to this meeting for the Scrutiny Committee on Wednesday, the 22nd of November 2023 in the Walton Suite in Winchester Guildhall. The time is 6:30 p.m. and my name is Councillor Caroline Brooke and I'm chairperson of the committee. We have a few housekeeping points before we start. This meeting is being recorded, live streamed and will be available on the council's YouTube channel. Can everyone please ensure mobile phones are on silent or switched off? And in the unlikely event that it's necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow the instructions given by the team. Can I welcome everybody to this meeting? And we will turn straight to the agenda. Mr. Watson, do we have any apologies today?
Good evening, Chair members. No apologies this evening.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest in the room? Councillor Scott.
Yes, because we're dealing with the housing HRA, Madam Chair, I need to declare that I'm a City Council tenant. Thank you.
Many thanks, Councillor Scott, and noted. I don't have any announcements this evening. So moving to the minutes of the meeting on the 6th of September 2023. Hopefully you've all had a chance to look through them. Are these agreed? Thank you. On to public participation. So we have Councillor Wallace with us this evening. Would you like to speak at the time of the papers or would you like to speak during this section? Okay, fabulous. Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Wallace. We don't have any members of TACT here in the room with us this evening. So they've sent their apologies. However, they were at the Cabinet meeting yesterday talking on the HRA paper and will attend the BHP committee next week when the paper is also being discussed. So moving on to the housing revenue account, business plan and budget options, we will have Councillor Westwood to introduce this and then Mrs. Keys, if you have any additional information you'd like to add, and then we'll come to you, Mr. Wallace, Councillor Wallace, for your questions. So, Councillor Westwood, if you'd like to come forward, please.
Thank you. And apologies to anyone who was at Cabinet yesterday because they may already have these notes. Okay, thank you. Following this item, we will hear about significant financial pressures facing the Council's General Fund and the local government sector as a whole. The HRA is also experiencing an unprecedented financial challenge. This is a magnitude never seen in the sector since we took over responsibility for self-financing our social housing business from the previous government subsidy scheme back in 2012. The housing revenue account is operated as a ring-fenced landlord account for the provision of social housing to our tenants. It must self-finance, and to ensure financial sustainability, the rents and service charges must be sufficient to fund the expenditure incurred to own, operate, and continually invest in the properties. The financial planning horizon for the HRA is 30 years. It must annually produce a viable 30-year business plan to demonstrate its ability to self-finance, ensure it has a capacity for ambitions to deliver new affordable homes for people across the district. We're in a period of high inflation, which is slowly reducing, with interest rates that are higher than experienced over many decades. In addition, building costs have increased by 23% over the last year and 58% over the last 2 years. The cost of living crisis has not gone away, and it's hitting our most vulnerable tenants hard. We're proud to have over 5,000 council homes in the Winchester district. To improve the energy efficiency of our homes, we're investing £45 million into retrofitting the fabric of our council homes to lower the tenants' energy costs and to provide warmer and more comfortable homes. We have to prioritise how and where we spend our tenants' money to deliver best value. It's right that we now have 2 significant work programmes that both improve the quality and comfort of our existing housing stock alongside delivering more new, highly efficient, energy efficient new homes. I'm able to present today a viable and sustainable business plan, which not only includes investment of £45 million to go greener faster by retrofitting our homes to bring them up to decent homes energy efficiency standards, but also reaffirms our commitment to the 1,000 homes target, albeit over a slightly longer period. HRA business planning is carried out annually, and all assumptions are revisited and undertaken afresh each year. When the economic situation improves, with interest rates and building costs at more reasonable levels, we will aim to deliver our 1,000 home target earlier and indeed look to exceed that target. In order to be viable, the business plan assumes several changes in strategy from previous years. These are detailed in the report, but in summary, they include proposals to continue the new approach of acquiring more homes from developers alongside our previous approach of building new homes ourselves. The move to 80% market rents for eco-friendly new homes. A £400,000 revenue savings plan for the housing service. Disposals of surplus assets to help fund the increased greener, faster capital investment in our existing homes. And investment to digitise and modernise processes to make them more accessible, simpler, quicker and easier for our customers. Also to make it possible for contact to be online 24/7 for those who prefer it. At Cabinet yesterday, we were asked to note assumptions that will be used to prepare the detailed HRA 2024-25 budget that will be brought to Council in February 2024. Additionally, Cabinet were asked to approve the future asset disposal policy for the next 8 years, and specifically disposal in principle of Barnes House in 2024-25, subject to further consultation and a review of costs, the move towards a full cost recovery for private connections to the Council's sewage treatment works. The proposal to move to rent increases being based on CPI plus 1% for shared owners in the HRA, and to revert to full cost recovery of tenant service charges that was subject to a one-off discretionary limit last year. So despite the challenging circumstances we face, I believe it's a strong plan that addresses those circumstances whilst improving the service and housing we make available to the current and future tenants who rely on them. Thank you.
Many thanks, Councillor Westwood. Ms Keys, did you want to add anything to the intro? No? Okay. Councillor Wallace, would you like to come forward for your public speaking? As always, you will have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. At yesterday's Cabinet meeting, I raised a number of questions on this report. Some were addressed at the time, but I'd like to follow up on several others. On the HRA debt to turnover ratio, Appendix 1 shows I plan to increase the debt to turnover ratio by almost 50%, from 0.21 in 2023-24 to 0.3 in 2031 to 2032. This is a major change to the structure of the account. At yesterday's meeting, the Finance Officer advised that the increase in debt is okay, provided that the debt can continue to be serviced, which was confirmed. But can the Finance Officer please elaborate on the wider implications or risks that result from increasing the HRA debt by almost 50%? On retrofit investment, again, I'll reiterate, it's great to see an additional 30 million investment into the retrofitting homes for some of our residents. We've been pushing for this, and we've all been pushing for this. It's great to see that coming through. Yesterday, the spend profile was clarified, but please can it also be clarified how this funding is intended to be spent? How many houses will be upgraded? Or I'm sure we don't have precise figures, but an estimate how many houses will be upgraded, and using what energy efficiency improvements. Obviously, we need to ensure that we achieve a good balance between the number of houses that are improved and the level or type of installation that's implemented. The proposed move to 80% market rent for affordable new homes. The approach of considering the overall cost of ownership of properties, rent and energy costs is understandable. However, to ensure that the approach delivers for our residents, please can you confirm the specific minimum energy standard that new homes included in this programme will achieve? I think yesterday we talked about kind of the the council standard. But what if we're asking our tenants to fork up a bit more rent? And what is the specific energy standard that we're going to be delivering? Asset disposals. I'm sure other members of the committee want to ask questions about the asset disposals, and I'm going to look forward to hearing about that. So I'm sure that'll come up in due course. Sewage treatment works cost recovery. Whilst the approach for reallocating wastewater costs to private residents is understandable, this could result in significant cost increases to some of our residents. Now, you may not be able to provide this today, but please could you provide a breakdown of the cost increases by site and more details about the consultation that is planned? I think the report called out that the average cost increase is around £500 per year. So this is a not insignificant sum to even to private residents. And if that's the average, I would expect some residents to have to pay quite a lot more than that. And it'd be useful to understand where that's going to hit. Finally, on the rent and service charge increases, as has been mentioned, we're still going through a cost of living crisis, and many residents will be feeling under pressure. So we all have a responsibility to protect our residents. So any rent and service charge increases need to be done in a responsible manner. Whilst all the details might not be available at this time, please can you confirm the process that is being adopted for reviewing the cost increases with tenants? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Should we come to those questions as we go through our questions? I think because many of them may be replicated. If there's any at the end, Councillor Wallace, that I've got noted down, then we'll pick them up specifically. Okay, so on to round the table. Councillor Scott, you kick us off.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to go straight in on the 80% market rent for new homes, and taking obviously into consideration what the portfolio holder said about the financial pressures, etc., etc. But on the flip side of that, obviously, it's family pressures and young people, which we want to serve in the district, pressures of finances as well. We need to sort of make sure. So my question would be in line with, has consideration from the Housing Cabinet, Cabinet member, gone back to the original rent setting work that was done by an IPG a few years ago about the way that we wanted to set rents, and schemes like the Valley has put more on a social rented footing rather than affordable setting. Members around the table at that time really concerned about affordables, not affordable in Winchester, and we can come up with loads of different examples with people in our areas unable to afford new property, which we provided, all registered providers have provided. So that's my first point: is this in line with the rent setting IPG? If not, why not? And in regards to what consideration, as we've talked about the council's pressures, have we taken into consideration what the cost pressures are when we talk about putting rents up, and the 80% market rent from 70%, etc., for the different tenures? Are we taking into consideration what family living costs and the cost of crisis consideration it is when we consider such a bold move as a council? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Westwood, would you like to pick up on the thinking behind some of
I'm not
this?
quite sure what the question was there, to be perfectly honest.
Okay, I'll repeat. We had a rent set in IPG a number of years ago. So the first question was, when you considered, or the Cabinet Housing considered, going from 70% to 80%, did you take into consideration the rent set in IPG findings and recommendations to the council?
Okay, I can't answer that question. Mr. Hendy, are you able to help with that at all, or Mrs. Knight? Thank you.
Sorry, Cabinet member, you wanted that question, so I was just giving you that question. So So was that not?
Councillor Scott, I think he's more likely to be able to answer the second one. If you ask your second one, and then we'll come to Mr. Keys and Mr. Hendy on the first one. Okay, we'll come to you on the first question, then we'll come back to the second question.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the proposal around the rents, the proposal to increase the rents to 80% of market rents, the report makes clear that the cost of new build housing now has increased considerably. The cost per square metre build has increased more, as about 100%. Interest rates have increased by 100% as well. New build housing is not viable at rents less than 80% market rents at the moment. Therefore, if the council wants to carry on with this new build programme, it has little option than to set the rents at that level. The report also makes the case, though, that if we set the rents to that level and develop homes that achieve at least EPC-B, the running costs that will be reduced by achieving that energy rating will not far, but it will outweigh the increased cost of rents being at 80%. So households will be better off by that.
Does that answer the question, Councillor Scott?
You're coming from a specific of the build cost. But what I'm coming from, and that's my second part, is what the financial restraints on our residents or people on our waiting list. What's the cost there? Because you're coming from a build cost and materials have gone up. That's fine, but you want to eventually get tenants and rented people in our properties. But we might need to do a forecast of actually can people afford to come into these new properties? Because I'm very aware that we've had Winster Village resident providers and Barton Farm, Kings Barton, and people cannot afford to go to those affordable properties off our allocation list. So it's quite a simple question, is have we done a financial check of the conditions of people on our waiting list or people already in our stock but wants to move to new build? Have we done a forecast there? Because all we've done, that all seem to be done, is what it's done from a build cost, materials cost. But people have to live in these properties, and we've done that forecast. That's what I'm asking for.
If I may, can I refer the councillors paragraph 12.6? Previously, the rent regime for new build housing was set at local housing allowance rates. So therefore, if a household was totally reliant on state benefits, the housing element of universal credit would totally cover the rents. This new proposal is setting the rents at 80% of market rents. It's higher than the local housing allowance. That paragraph at 12.6 gives an example that if we build new build housing and the energy rating of that property is EPC-B, because that significantly reduces the running cost of that home, even at the rents at 80%, that household will still be better off. That's the answer to the question.
And if I can just come into that as well, I'm clearly, Councillor Scott, what we're looking at is the overall cost of paying your rent within that home and the running costs of that home in terms of the energy costs, which the new builds will significantly reduce the amount of energy that's required to heat your home and to make good living conditions within it. Now we're looking at the properties that we've recently completed and brought into the portfolio in North Whiteley have something like a 70% reduction in the energy usage to heat those homes. Now equate that to the current level of energy prices, and that's a significant sum of money. So the other way of looking at it is that we are providing new homes, and I can also look at the flats that will be coming online at Winnell in this picture as well, at a rental level, and we have to look at the fairness across the whole portfolio as well. And is it right to offer a rent that's the same level for someone moving into an older property that has significantly higher energy costs than somebody who's moving into one of our newer properties that's been built to EPC-B level and requires significantly less energy costs? So in terms of your question, have we looked at the overall picture? We've looked at the picture of what does it take in terms of money in rental and energy costs to live in one of our council homes. It is a different ratio, if you like, in the newer homes. That your energy costs are more significantly less than in the existing homes. Now, even with the retrofit program, when we're moving to EPCC, we will not be able to bring them up to the level of these new homes at this point in time. So there will continue to be a differential. So that's at the level that we've looked at it.
One more.
Yep, that's fine, councillor.
So again, material, and again, subject about what you're going to say for people on real cost of living crisis now. And my supplement question, I'm not talking about the bill, I'm talking about the cost of people living now with food, clothing, heat and whatever. That the reality is that people coming in to want to look at affordability, yeah, the reality already, the experience that we have constantly is that people have gone to affordable, but actually in the end, actually, and even though they've been built to a good standard in these new schemes, yeah, they still find it's far better to come away from those schemes and come back to the old council estates because they can't afford the affordable rents, because in the end that supersedes their cost of living. And that's my point. Have we thought about the cost of living ratio? We were talking about, you're answering materials, you're answering about the energy efficiency. I'm asking about the reality of people living in our district and the cost of living. Have we done anything forecast on that? And that's the question, which is the second part of my question. So what about, is that the right formula? But actually, you haven't. No one's asked me, have you gone back to the IPG either, to look at what we did discussed back as a council, because that was a piece of work that council's done, recommended to cabinet. So that should be still live for the council. So again, that wasn't answered either. So thank you.
Mr. Hendy, you look like you're ready to speak.
Thank you, Chair. So starting the last point, Councillor, in relation to the rent levels, as I said earlier, that the issue is that schemes are just not viable unless we charge 80% rent at the moment. So the council is not in a position to do new build housing unless we set rents to that level. And I totally understand your point about how that may impact on individual households. So what we've done in this report at paragraph 12.6 is set out an example of the total cost of living in a home that would be at EPCB. So that would be a new home that we developed. And the total costs of running and paying rent of a home at that level are less than the previous rent regime, where rents were set at local housing allowance levels. And that's important because local housing allowance levels are the maximum housing benefit, as was, that can be attracted by a household. And I don't dispute, there may be challenges for households that are totally reliant on benefits in terms of the overall level of universal credit and how that allows them to pay for things other than their housing costs. But the focus of this paper on making sure that that policy move to 80% doesn't place them in a worse position, because the overall running costs of rent and running the home in terms of heating, lighting, everything is less. That's what this report shows. Those two things together, we can show that this policy shift will not cost them more, in fact, will cost them less than the previous position. But separate to that is the point you're making about, can they afford food, etc., the rest of their universal credit. That's a different debate and not something that this report addresses.
Did as an IPG, we looked at the circumstances around the whole package of why people want to come into rented properties, and that's what that piece of work was, a thorough piece of work over a number of meetings. I think it was chaired by Councillor Hiscock, if I remember rightly. I certainly attended loads of those meetings, and that was the package that we were looking at. There's a specific piece of work the council did, because we were in fear that our residents were actually going for properties in, for example, I've got one in my mind, Kings Barton, and had success of property and then told by a resident provider, oh, sorry, you don't pass our financial test, and were told to get out of there, and they had to come back into the allocation system. So I challenged Ben, the lead officer, Richard Botham, are we looking at a two-tier allocation system then? Because that's the danger that we may enter into if people cannot afford that 80%, even though they may find that their cost circumstance goes down. It's just just the rent setting is still something that may be one hurdle too much for our residents.
Councillor Scott, would you be happy if I note down an action for the team to find the results of that ICG and IPG, sorry, and just have a look over it and for future information? Yes. Understand. Councillor Todd.
Yeah, I think the thing that has changed and that is new and different since the IPG reported in 2015 is energy costs. And certainly what we've been hearing back from tenants is that energy bills are going through the roof. So that if we had an approach to house building that didn't take that into account, then frankly, we wouldn't be doing what's right for our tenants. That's why we're investing 45 million in retrofitting to cut bills. And that's why we build our new houses to a higher standard to cut bills. The challenge with that is it costs more to build a house to a higher environmental standard. So what the team have done is basically work out that the rent plus bills for our new houses will be less than the rent plus bills used to be before we were building to this standard. So that's, because in the end, it's £1, it's one set of money. And if what we were doing was cutting rents and giving people higher energy bills, we're not doing them any favours. So the plan that's in place, what's here today, is a plan that cuts bills by more than the rent is going up because the houses are built to such a high standard. And that's the plan that we have in front of us. So the way the sums work out, and it's paragraph 12.6, the way the sums work out is that people who are being really hit hard by the cost of food and the cost of energy at the moment will be better off by being in one of our new council houses, even though the rents are higher than they might have been in the past, because in this new world of really expensive energy bills, they're going to be paying less. They're going to have to find less money if they're in a new, high standard, low energy, low bill council house. That's what we're doing. So I think it's useful to go back and have a look at the previous report, but it was a different world. And the thing that's different is when you look at that report, it doesn't include, it uses the word energy once. It doesn't talk about the bills that people are paying, because in those times, it wasn't something that we worried about in the same way. I mean, it's always been a pressure for people, but that pressure has gone through the roof. And so what's changed between that report and today, and the thing that's led to this change in approach and this change in thinking, is we know people are being hit really hard by high gas bills, high electricity bills. And our whole approach is to cut those bills. It has the second effect, which is also really important to us, to cut carbon. But because we're cutting those bills, we're putting forward a programme here where people will be paying less than they would do before. They might pay the council a bit more, but they'll be paying the electricity companies and the gas companies a lot less.
Thank you.
And that's how they're better off.
So I've just made a note after that question to say refresh the team to refresh themselves on the IPG in 2015 to see how this might feed into the decision-making process. Okay. Councillor Pett.
Thank you, Chair. I fully get what Councillor Todd and Councillor Westwood have said, and clearly, yes, moving to one of these new homes, much lower energy costs, so the overall cost to the tenant will be less. But if we're going to do that, we've got a communications issue here, and we've got to ensure that that is widely understood, that that's what we're putting forward as a proposal, and perhaps change the metric that we judge these things by. I only have a slight concern then that the money that people have coming in available to them to pay rent as opposed to paying bills may not keep up with that new metric in effect that we're using, which is total overall cost of living. So I think that needs to be addressed.
Thank you, Councillor Pett. Councillor Horrell.
Chair, thank you. And just to reiterate the point that was clarified yesterday at Cabinet, this proposal only impacts the new homes that we're building. So if you're a new tenant to our stock, but moving into a current house, you're still at the old levels, which I think is really important because obviously there will be a set of new homes, but obviously there will still be a significant number moving into current stock. And actually, the bigger question is all those who are not going into the new homes, who then have the current level and the 7%, circa 7% rent increase. I'm conscious today, just hot off the press, we've got the local housing allowance changes and some other factors coming out of the budget. And I'm assuming, given this paper was a sort of in principle paper, that we'll have some number crunching to do in terms of what that nets out at based on the latest information from the budget changes. And you're nodding, but that's quite reassuring to make sure that we get the latest financial picture as a result of some of these changes. Other good things like the living wage increase. We know a lot of our tenants are working, they're not necessarily benefit claimants. So a lot of factors coming in to get that overall picture, perhaps to reassure Councillor Scott that we've got the right equation for as many as we can hopefully support. And just looking, Mrs. Knight and Mr. Hendy both nodding, which is helpful to understand that that is your intent, as it were. That's my question. Is that the intent, Chair?
And there were profuse nods over there. My question on the rising building costs is, have we re-explored whether it would be cheaper to look at modular buildings and how they would be impacted, and would that be cheaper? And so whether there are alternatives.
Chair, I can answer that. I can answer it from my experience of where I worked before, where we did enter into contracts on modular house construction, and actually it's more expensive than traditional house building initially, but over the life of the asset it can work out cheaper. So currently the schemes that are in the new build programme, we haven't looked at using modular construction. There are advantages, as I said, in terms of the quality. So over a lifetime of an asset, you reduce costs. The disadvantages of modular housing is you have to generate a volume of demand that will drive prices down. And I'm afraid the level of our programme would not be sufficient to generate that volume where you'd be able to go to a modular off-site manufacturer and drive the prices down. It's like any factory, they need a lot of demand to drive the prices down. My experience before, the local authority I worked with before, we partnered with registered providers so we could increase the overall demand and therefore drive prices down. Another disadvantage of that is you have standard house build types, and so your control in terms of design. In some of our individual smaller schemes, it would limit the type and design of homes that we'll be able to provide. So we haven't looked at that yet. The schemes at the moment are all based on traditional build.
Thank you. Councillor Westwood.
And if I can give a practical example, Mr. Hendy, because I have had a conversation with our new homes team. So if I look at the flats at Winnell, then that was explored at Winnell. So what we were building there was two blocks, 6 stories high, and replicating layers and so on. So it was looked at a modular form of build at Winnell, and the prices for the modular build there, bearing in mind you've still got to get all the infrastructure and everything else in place to put the modular units upon, was 15% higher. So we did have a look at that prior to the construction of that, and went down the traditional path.
Thank you. Councillor William.
Thank you. Actually, Councillor Horror has just asked the question that I was going to ask, just to clarify. It was the new builds and not existing new builds that would be part of the scheme. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Horror.
Chair, in the report, it's very clear that we are looking to go to full cost recovery for service charges. And I appreciate, again, this is a statement of intent, not the detail behind that. And also that we're looking to recover our costs for our sewerage connections to those who are now own their own homes. But both of those, as appropriate as they may be, to ensure that we get the right monies in for the costs that we have incurred, and that HRA tenants don't pay inappropriately for private residences. Just to be clear from an approach point of view, that we will consult fully on this one, and if there are significant variables that we may think about a staggering, a staging, a graduation of that we're not suddenly going to go from A to B and find that there's a huge increase. We may have to do that over time. And both of those areas, I understand the intent, but they are potentially quite complicated, and there may be some significant costs that we're not aware of at this point, which may influence how we'd like to see that handled for both private and indeed council tenants, so all our residents who might be impacted. Looking please for clarification on the approach if that is the route that we finally take when we do the budget. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll start with that. So in terms of the water treatment works, then I think we're all aware that we've got a significant number, about 50 water treatment works. Each of them are slightly different. Each of them have different operating costs. And you know, we need to, and this is a historic problem. This is not a problem that we've encountered this year. This goes back many, many years. That we've not been covering the costs, and we're covering the costs for those water treatment works. So we actually need to start from the beginning and look at the actual operational costs, the costs of these, regardless of the recovery of monies, to ensure that we're starting from an even base and actually thoroughly understand what these plants are costing us and are we running them in the most economical way. We also need to look at who's using them. You know, we're aware that some of these may be used exclusively by private tenants now, and not council tenants. So we need to understand the usage there. We need to understand the leases and the terms and conditions within the leases, which we need to review every single one of those. So the consultation will be both inwards looking in terms of understanding the data around all of these plants and how we operate them, and external with the users of these. So that's on the water treatment side.
Councillor Todd.
Yeah, one thing that might be useful for reference is in yesterday's cabinet meeting, we slightly changed the recommendation that you have in front of us. So recommendation 9 had the words subject to further consultation, the terms of individual leases and a review of costs added at the beginning of the sentence. So everything you're asking for is something that we have already agreed that we will do.
Thank you.
And if I may, Chair, Councillor Wallace has asked a question for cost by site for wastewater treatment works, but clearly, as Councillor Westwood has indicated, that there's work to do there. So we will know the cost per site in due course, so that won't be immediately available, Chair.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions on the main part of this report? Councillor Horrell.
Chair, we've been working very hard to welcome our Ukrainian guests, and it was indicated again in the budget today that the scheme, the Homes for Ukraine scheme, is going to continue to be funded. There was some doubt about that, which is very good news for those who are acting as host families. Does that in any way, because we are looking obviously at the accommodation going forward of our Ukrainian guests and indeed other asylum seekers and others who Afghan families, etc. Does that have any impact on the current approach to the budget and mean that we do have to make any other amendments or changes as we go forward? I appreciate we don't know the specifics yet, but does that strategically have any impact? Thank you.
Chair, no, it has no impact. The budgets are in HRE in total. If we have any housing obligations to households from those groups, they'll enter the housing via the housing register as anyone else would in the district. There's no specific budgetary issues related to that at all. Sorry, for the housing revenue account. There may be for the general fund because there would be a homelessness pressure.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Horrell.
Chair, one point that came up yesterday, and I'm just seeking clarification that the Cabinet heard this loud and clear, that in the report it was very obvious that there's a lot of emphasis on new homes, and all to be commended. There's a lot of emphasis on retrofit and the investment in that. But there are a group of residents out there, Mr. Hendy and I have talked about them a lot, is that sort of group who are not in either camp right now. They just want their house looked after and repaired. And it's one of the areas that we've had some feedback from tenants that we're not always doing as brilliantly as possible. Now, we know that we have a contract review coming up. That's mentioned in here, and we have that to deal with. But obviously in the short term, and I know Councillor Westwood is equally on side with this, that we want to make sure that we do the repairs as effectively and as speedily as we can. And they're probably the majority of people at the moment who just want their house to be looked after well. Can the team reassure us that that group have sufficient investment in the new budget for that level of service to be delivered to those residents in a way that perhaps they're not feeling total satisfaction with what we're doing currently? Have we got that covered sufficiently from a resource point of view as we go forward? Thank you.
Councillor Westwood.
Thank you. Yes, as I said yesterday, there is £2 million additional allocated for the support, maintenance and repairs for the next fiscal within the budget, and it probably wasn't highlighted as prominent as it should be in the paper, and we had that discussion subsequently that we'll look to highlight that in the final paper very much so. Just to talk about the numbers of repairs that are done, I think just looking at Mrs. Knight's 1,500 a month, I believe. So 1,500 repairs a month are done. I think we get 6 or 7, maybe 8 complaints a month about that. So the numbers are low, but clearly any numbers are wrong. If I look at the tenant satisfaction survey, then whilst repair and maintenance was prominent in the written answers and through text at the end of the survey, the number of people that were satisfied with repairs and maintenance as a service in this council was at 80%. So it's the same story that the people that haven't had have had the problems of shouting quite loud, the people who get the service are not shouting loud. And I'm not saying it's perfect in any way, shape or form, but I just wanted to put it in perspective. It is not a significant number. It's not over half. It's a smaller fraction. It's too high for our liking. I think that some of the communication needs to be improved. So another aspect of this is the review of the systems and communication methods we're using. So I outlined it in the introduction that we're looking to offer 24/7 availability of being able to report, monitor issues and services that we're providing, so that will be there. We're looking to revamp the IT systems should it be necessary to do so. Additionally, we're looking at the contract to make sure that the service levels, certainly on the retender of the contract, will be a prominent part of the requirements going forwards. And there's work ongoing, which I'm aware of within Mrs. Knight's team, to currently review with Osborne's the way we operate and looking at those processes that they're there today, because we can't wait 2 years to improve this. So we're looking to improve around the systems and communications we've got today and improving the process there. So there's a lot of work going on in that area, and I know there's organisational changes been made within the department as well to further focus people on delivering far better and excellent customer service, and have problems repaired once and done, and to abide by our commitments. When we say we're going to turn up, we will turn up, and when we get there to do the job, we'll do the job and repair it and walk away. That's where we want to get to. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, the systems today, and provision in the budget to spend where we need to spend to make it better in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had a question on 14.3 and 14.4, pages 31 and 32. What do the totals in those tables actually tell us? Because I assumed it was meant to be the average. But the totals in those tables are not the mean average. They're not the median average. My GCSE maths has let me down. I can't remember the mode average. And it's not the averages, 80% of the averages either. So what do those totals actually tell us? What actually are they?
So, Mr. Hender, Mrs. Keys, are you able to help with that one? So my maths is not good enough to do that either, I'm afraid.
So, for example, on the average weekly rent 24.25, for example, on table 1, the first table in 14.3, the mean average is I can't remember, I did that maths a while back, but it was something like 136. If I did 80%, it was something like 109, but neither of them are 123.39. So I'm just wondering what those totals actually are, because it specifically refers to them in 14.3 that the average rent increase of tenants will be 123.39, which is the total from 24.25 table, but it's not the average. Councillor Reach?
Just a stab in the dark, is it not the number of houses per, the number of 3-bedroom houses multiplied by that, because we don't have a flat rate? Obviously, we have more 2 and 3s than we do 5 and 6. So it's an average multiplied by the number of houses we have. Weighted averages, thank you.
Okay. So as a suggestion, can we make that clearer in future? Because actually that number doesn't tell us very much. Thank you. Do we have any further questions on this paper? No? On the appendix 1? No. Do we have any debate? No? Oh, Councillor Horrell.
Chair, thank you. I mean, firstly to say thank you to the officers, because it's clear there's a lot of work that's gone into the sort of thinking on trying to balance a difficult set of factors for the HRA. It is one of the services that this council provides that I think we should be hugely proud of. I'll keep saying that because I think we should all be very proud. It is sort of an example of local government at its best, and I know many authorities wish they had homes as we do to offer to their residents. But that only works if you've got enough money in the pot to make everything balance. And it's clear that we have some choices to make going forwards, and perhaps some things that historically we wouldn't have thought of considering or being pursuing quite so avidly. However, I think the important element here is to ensure as we go forward that all our data points are really clear, and we have all the exact numbers, because there will be iterations obviously of this as we move forward to February approval. And indeed that we're not only balancing the provision of decent homes and communities for the current residents, but looking to build new, which again we should be hugely proud of in terms of our delivery of new homes. So I think I can only say thank you for the efforts so far, and that hopefully you will take us on this journey as you evolve, and particularly Mrs. Keys and her team evolve the numbers and develop that understanding. Some of the new factors that have come out today that may in the budget may impact some of our assumptions, so that we're really clear that we're doing the best for everyone, but being very mindful of the costs that everyone has to incur. That's us building and residents paying in their rents and service charges. And so try and get to the very best, and obviously engaging importantly with the tenant groups to make sure that they feel consulted and understanding why we have made certain steps forward. So, Chair, if I can encourage that, I think that would be a great way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Any other debate? No? Okay, I'll summarise the points I've written down. So refresh the team to refresh themselves on the IPG in 2015 to see how this might feed into the decision-making process. Ensure that it's communicated clearly to new residents of new homes regarding the overall cost of living and running them rather than putting them off by the rental costs. To come back and do the number crunching based on today's autumn statement. Review the cost of water treatment works and how to handle this going forwards, and to make clearer that the averages, the totals in the tables aren't based on the totals themselves but weighted, because at the moment the table is misleading. Anything else that anyone thinks I've missed? Councillor Horrell?
Chair, I think several of us just really want it to be made clear that the 80% is for the new homes, and I think Councillor Williams and I were in the same place, and that the new tenants in older current homes are still on the old basis. That's just, I think, just so that we're all really clear. That would be helpful to clarify in the paper. And although I'm grateful for the leader's comments on consultation and the review for the sewerage piece of the paper, the sewerage charges, I do think we want that same level of review for the full cost recovery on service charges as well for tenants. I think we want the same approach for both, that we look at it in detail in the round with the appropriate consultation, given that some of those service charges may actually throw up some anomalies for some folks. Thank you.
We just still got a couple of Councillor Wallace's original questions. We're just debating which ones have been covered and which ones haven't. Councillor Wallace, on the what minimum energy standard new homes will achieve, the EPCB, does that answer your question? Yeah, that was the answer to that one. You wanted the breakdown of cost increases by site.
And we've done that one, Chair. That work will come forward as the team develop the work on the wastewater treatment works.
And you wanted to understand more about what the energy improvements actually were.
I haven't answered that one, Chair.
So could anybody respond to that one?
Chair, there are a mixture of things. So as was Councillor West was mentioned, it's a fabric first approach, primarily insulation to people's homes, loft insulation, cavity wall insulation. Over the 8-year period, there'll be external wall insulation. There'll also be measures to improve the efficient running of the home. There will also be window replacement over the 8-year period as well. So bringing forward some window replacements in that 8-year period. We have the detail of that plan if you're interested, because obviously we need to provide that to be able to feed into the HRA business plan.
Thank you. Does that answer all of your questions, Councillor Wallace?
I'd love to see that plan at some point if that would be possible. Great, thank you. There was, yeah.
I just add to
Councillor
that, Chair. Yeah, so we at the Cabinet Housing Subcommittee, we did have a presentation on the retrofit programme, and the individual work streams within the retrofit programme are within that presentation, which is available publicly, and you can see exactly the number of properties and the measures that are bylined there. It doesn't break it down into the financial values within that paper. I guess we could look at that if you were interested in the financial values, but it lists out what we're doing by the different area of fabric within the buildings in that presentation, which I think you saw. It has within there the number of houses that we intend to do this fiscal. It doesn't have the number of houses that we intend to do over the entire programme, because we are running it in phased approaches. So we have a phase for this year. As we move forwards into next year, then we will replan, regroup when we see where we are, because as you can imagine, this is a rather complex exercise. If you walk into a house which has got asbestos in the soffits, then it's a different ball game to walking into a house where it's a fairly straightforward retrofit within there. So we are learning still. We are learning how much each house costs, how much each type of house. If we're going to a house in Stanmore that's 100 years old, that's a bit different to going to a 1970s house elsewhere in the district. So we are still learning on that as well, to get the average prices by different types of home. But you'll find for this particular phase, all those numbers are in that retrofit presentation.
Thank you.
There were two others that haven't been answered yet.
So risk debt,
Yeah, the risk debt and
asset disposal.
assets, yes.
Would anybody like to comment on them?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to comment on the debt to turnover ratio. As I said at Cabinet, this we can see that fluctuating in the table in Appendix 1, and that is due to changing in the gearing and the borrowing levels that the HRA has to deliver its investments. So you can see that there is an increase to borrowing, but there's also an increase to the working balance as well, shown in the final column of that table. And the business plan assumes a mix of both internal and external borrowing. So the amount and the balance of that is kept under review as interest rates fluctuate. So this is just to represent some assumptions on which we've built this 30-year business plan.
Chair, if I can answer the question on asset disposal. So what's proposed here is disposal of individual plots, because that's not they are ordinarily not economic for us to develop ourselves. I suppose the added bonus of bringing those to the market will provide some small scale development across the district. Barnes House has already been discussed, where we've carried out a range of appraisals to establish that actually it's not economic for us to refurbish Barnes House and bring back into use, and as a site it's not possible for development because of some rights of way across the back of the site. And the third aspect of asset disposal are where we have void properties that become available for reletting. We assess them, and actually we find it's not economic in relation to the amount of investment that we require to achieve EPCC. It will be in the council's interest to dispose of that property, use the capital receipt to fund the retrofit work to the remaining stock.
Thank you. So the recommendation this evening was to comment on the CAB 3432. I think we've done that, and noted that the committee will be presented with a detailed housing revenue report at its meeting on the 6th of February 2024, prior to the Cabinet on the 8th of February 2024. So are we all happy to move on to the next slide? Thank you. Okay, so moving on to the general fund budget options and medium-term financial strategy. Councillor Wallace, you don't want to speak on this one, no? Just to confirm. Okay, so we'll have an intro from Councillor Cutler, if we may, and then Mrs. Keys, if there's anything else to add. So over to you, Councillor Cutler.
Thank you, Chair. The general fund budget options and medium-term financial strategy is the paper we bring every year, which provides the longer-term, medium-term financial strategy, the medium-term financial strategy, but also the assumptions that we will be using on which to base the full budget for the 24-25 that will be brought to Scrutiny, Cabinet and Council in February. And the public sector is currently facing probably the most significant financial challenges and demand pressures that we've ever had, with many, particularly upper tier and unitary authorities, warning that they may have to issue Section 114 notices in the near future. But 52% of district councils are now saying, are now warning that they will have to use reserves to produce a balanced budget this year. So it's quite extensive, this pressure. Careful financial management and planning means Winchester's immediate financial position through to 2026 is sound and stable. And this strategy sets out our approach to manage those limited financial resources, to protect our core council service and enable the delivery of the council plan. However, Winchester is no exception to feeling the pressures. and the medium-term financial plan in Appendix 1 shows a projected annual budget shortfall of 3.4 million per annum in 26-27, rising to 5.7 in 28-29. This is an increased deficit over the medium-term financial strategy published last year, the £3 million gap that was reported in the, and is primarily due to new responsibilities put onto the district councils, particularly the opportunity to significantly increase our recycling rates. We want to try. I'm sorry, I jumped. So we have a window of opportunity to steer the council to financial sustainability in the future, and we're putting in place robust measures to address the medium-term budget challenges. And in the paper, we set out some aspects of the TC25, an organisation-wide transformation programme to deliver transformational changes and to deliver the £3.5 million savings within 3 years. We want to transform the way transform our services to save money, but also to digitise and reduce the carbon impact of delivering our services. We're looking to make services more accessible and make online access simpler, quicker and easier. We want to enable the majority of our customers to access services 24/7, not just during traditional opening hours. And by doing this, we can prioritise telephone and face-to-face service for the most vulnerable who really need that. We want to encourage paperless services such as e-billing to reduce both the cost of the council and the carbon impact. And the TC25 programme is always open to suggestions from members as well as staff. I mean, there have been over 50 suggestions submitted by staff, and we're in the process of sifting through those suggestions and identifying some of the strategies. But we've had not a single suggestion from a councillor. So it would, if you think of things, submit them to Mrs. Keyes, and she'll be pleased to hear the ideas. Nothing's off the table. Cabinet are being asked to improve the assumptions that will be used to prepare the 24-25 budget that will be brought to Council in February. These include investing in greener, faster measures such as HVO fuel for council vehicles, more recycling and recycling of food waste, and encouraging customers to choose to go paperless. We'll be investing in transformation so we can digitalise and modernise our services, as I mentioned, and we'll set aside additional funding for unavoidable budget pressures such as the cost of providing temporary accommodation. The paper also details the assumptions in relation to service income budgets, of emerging capital budgets, and the adequacy of reserves. So I welcome questions on this paper, and any comments from Scrutiny will be considered as we move forward to develop the detailed budget.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. Mrs. Keyes, did you want to add anything to that? No? Okay, we'll come straight to questions. Does anybody have any questions on the main paper, pages 37 to 58? Councillor Horrell.
Chair, I'm delighted to hear Councillor Cutler say that members can send in their TC25 comments. That's to be welcomed. I think you probably haven't had any because we weren't certain of our position in that process, but I'm sure many of us will be giving those to you. However, the question really, probably to Mrs. Keyes as much as anyone, is if TC25 doesn't generate the 3 million that you're looking for, what is the what other risk mitigation activities do we have in place to fill that gap, or is the assumption that we will get there? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, this is a robust look at the way we deliver all of our services. So given the examples of options that have come forward so far, I'm confident that through the TC25 process we can find the savings necessary. And if our first sift of options doesn't produce sufficient savings to balance the budget in the medium term, then we will have to go back and we will look again and we will keep looking.
Thank you.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Just building on that as well, in recommendation 3A Roman 2 is around the £1.4 million for expanding recycling services to include food waste. It does assume 8% government funding. That's quite a big assumption. What's the risk if that doesn't materialise?
We have been assured that new burdens funding will be available for those that hadn't started a food waste disposal system. It's one of the reasons why we held off, because we understood that that was likely to be the case, and that's been confirmed recently. The reason that we've budgeted for an 80% return is because government will use a standard methodology, which might mean that it doesn't cover all our costs. Theoretically, they should cover all our costs, but we're covering it 80%. There is a risk that we get that figure wrong, but these are broad assumptions on, it's a broad assumption on the cost in the first place. There are a whole series of yes, measured assumptions on the information we have now about the implementation of the whole change in recycling, which is clearly a major project over the next couple of years. We have to work on the assumptions and figures we've been given both by Hampshire County Council and the indications from government. And yes, there's always risk there, but I think it's a safe assumption to go at 80% and suggest there will be some costs for us.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. Councillor Pett.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you for the opportunity for members to contribute to TC25. Could I ask the officers, do we have a set of high-level process manuals or anything like that, sort of ISO 9000 compliance documentation that we can make a start with? Well, okay, quality manuals for how we do things as a council.
The Chief Executive saying
yes. Thank you, Councillor Pett. Yes, absolutely. We're running the TC25 programme as a Tier 1 project within the council. Therefore, we're using the principles of our project methodology to do so. Therefore, Ms Keys and our Corporate Head of Service, Ms Trinar, have brought forward a project initiation document, which has been agreed by the board. We have therefore a set of operating principles. We have a risk log. We have a change management process, and we're currently going through the first sift. So yes, the process of the TC25 is indeed managed as is any Tier 1 report. I said
sorry, that wasn't quite the question.
Oh, it's
my question
quality.
Was, what quality manuals do we have for how we do things today, not for how we manage the TC25 project?
Do things today, but by that process for a project, Councillor Pett. I'm misunderstanding things.
I think possibly Councillor Pett is asking for a level of detail that at this stage wouldn't be appropriate for councillors have experience of working within the council and see things that they think could be improved, and that is really the sort of level initially that we need people to come to us from. And going into the absolute detail of our operating manuals, I think is probably something that might be beyond.
No, the question really is, do such manuals exist? Not that I necessarily want to go through them all. That's what I'm getting at.
So your question is, have we implemented one of the quality processes, which means that every single process that the council follows for everything that it does is fully documented? So, for example, there's a fully documented process for what happens if somebody brings up to complain about a missed bin collection or something like that, and have we implemented that kind of quality process in absolutely everything the council does? I think my understanding is that's not the case. It's variable according to different parts of the organisation. I mean, obviously processes
I mean,
Right, so
Absolutely. Sorry, councillor Pitt. Forgive me, I misunderstood your question there. Do we have ISO 14000? No. Which sets out a quality management system. Do we have standard operating procedures for common processes? Yes. Will each service have a document which might vary from a side of A4 on how you process a taxi license through to a manual on how you do another service? Yes, because clearly we use those to onboard new staff. This obviously isn't our first step into transformation, because transformation has been continual for as long as many of us have been in local government. And some years ago, we brought in lean thinking. And at that point, we did a lot of work using the process of Kaizen, etc., to drive out waste. However, we probably underestimated the amount of work that was needed to go through the whole council at that time. So, for instance, we looked at our planning service and our customer front end service. So we have some documented processes there. As both Councillor Cutler and Councillor Westwood have said, the challenge is so much greater now. We are a blank sheet of paper and re-looking. But yes, we've given it a stab. I would say we're in the same ballpark as many councils of our size at a district level.
Okay, thanks. That's what I was trying to get at. And what is the baseline? So I'm sure you're managing the TC25 project in exemplary way, but it's that baseline that we start from that I was trying to discover. Thanks.
Councillor Horrell.
Chair, in the report, Mrs. Keys, I think, refers to some of the impacts of inflation, cost of borrowing, obviously cost of building and the like. How do we think that will impact some of our major regeneration projects, CWR, maybe Station Approach, in terms of the business case going forward? And will they be reviewed thoroughly in the context of where we find ourselves now and maybe their ability to move forward?
Chair, we constantly assess the impact that economic forces such as inflation and interest rates have on all of our major projects. Specifically on regeneration, obviously the structure that we have in place for Central Winchester Regeneration and our partnership arrangement shelters us from some of the impact of some of the direct impact that we might suffer if we were developing out ourselves. And with the Station Approach example, clearly we'll be taking into account whatever the market forces and the economic conditions are as we bring forward any business case for that particular project.
So can I just clarify, are all projects still in play in this budgetary framework as we move forward? Thank you.
Yeah, there's been no change to the capital programme, the capital strategy as it was revised after outturn from this year. So the team are currently looking at any changes, any new schemes that might need to be brought into that capital programme, and that will form part of the detailed budget that comes forward in February.
And Chair, could I just ask Mrs. Keys to remind us of the projects that were removed in February 23 from the list as a result of some of those challenges that you have just mentioned?
I'm afraid, Chair, I don't have that list to hand at the moment.
We have that. Would you be able to provide that to us afterwards, later? Yep. Sorry, Councillor Cutler.
They will be in the minutes from last year. They're accessible to everybody, and so yes, I'm sure they can be found, but I think councillors can find them for themselves.
Thank you. Any other questions on the main body of the report? Councillor Reid.
Just to clarify, point of clarification, please, on page 42, paragraph 7.3, where we talk about carbon and nutrient offsetting. Could you just clarify what that means, please? Because I thought we don't do carbon offsetting. 7.3 on page 42.
It will explore the areas where we have carbon and nutrient offsets that we can make some money from, rather than the other way around. We're not talking about going and buying them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions on the main body of the report? No. Appendix 1 then, on page 59. No. Appendix 2 on page 61. Appendix 3 on page 63. Any questions on Appendix 4 on page 65? No. Do we have any debate on this paper? No. I'd like to thank Councillor Cutler for his offer for taking the minutes from scrutiny to your decision day in December for consideration. Other than us being refreshed of the previous surplus borrowing costs that, as Councillor Horrell just mentioned, I don't have any other points to note for you to take to your decision day. Does anybody, have I missed anything that anybody think was important? No. Okay.
Chair, could I just ask that clearly when we sent out the video on TC25 on the 20th of October, Democratic Services update, it wasn't picked up by councillors because it was fairly clear in there that councillors could put in their views. So obviously we haven't communicated that very well, but we'll attempt to get that message out to councillors again. We will be talking to both opposition groups over the next couple of weeks, and we can clarify that. And we've certainly been clarifying it with our own group. The opportunity's been there for a little while.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. Councillor Horrell?
Yes, it was the same point. I don't think councillors have fully understood their role in this in the broader sense. And if you could reconfirm how, where and when, that would be very helpful to everyone. Thank you.
We're very happy to do that. As you know, myself and Councillor Cutler have agreed that we want to meet the other groups to hear people's ideas and actually have a chance to for you to raise any issues that you have in terms of things you'd like addressed. And absolutely talking about TC25, both with the Conservative Party group and the Green Party group and the Independent are all things that we will be doing to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to input. The conversations with the Liberal Party, the Liberal Democrat Party group will also, of course, be ongoing as they have been, as colleagues know.
Thank you. So any further comments before we move on to the next item? No. So we've looked over this and we don't have any real significant input for your decision day, Councillor Cutler, but again, your offer was appreciated. So thank you for your in questions on this paper, and we will now move on to the Q2 finance and performance monitoring piece that we've had the performance panel look at for us again. Councillor Cutler, I'll come to you in a moment for the intro, but a brief intro, and then we'll come to Councillor Horrell for the full intro on the discussion. And then we'll come to you, Councillor Wallace, for your questions. Councillor Cutler.
Thank you, Chairman. I didn't actually have a planned intro to this because I thought that given it had gone through the performance panel, Councillor Horrell would probably be reporting her notes. This is the standard performance monitoring report, the Q2 report, which has the provides the usual reports, including the financial update, summary of the council's progress during Q2, refreshed set of key performance indicators adopted in December, those KPIs adopted in December 22, and also highlights reports of each of the council's tier 1 programs and projects, which I would imagine we will be including a report for TC25 in time on that. And the performance panel took place on the 7th of November. I think it was a 2-hour meeting where we went through it very thoroughly, and I'm sure Councillor Horrell will report on that.
Councillor Horrell, coming to you for the full intro, please.
Chair, thank you. Yes, the panel met as normal. Under 2 hours, I think this time. We went through a detailed review of Q2, looking at all of the documentation that we had been provided with, and looking back at the notes from the previous meeting. In our usual way, we did a page turn. We had several officers in the room who were able to answer questions directly, which was helpful. Mr. Watson very kindly drew up our list of items that were raised but were unable to be answered at the time, and I think today we have seen the output of that final part of our report, which is helpful, because in the new way of doing business, I think we want to make sure that when we get to seeing you, Chair, and the full scrutiny panel, that we have all the answers before you. So if I may, I would ask that that updated set of performance panel minutes, which were previously published, are given to everyone so that they can see the answers to all of the outstanding actions. I understand there is one, I was advised there was one item that would be updated this evening in terms of the questions that we asked here, but I think on the whole they have been addressed, as I said, and we'll come back to that in a moment. The Chair, what we did say, which is really for this committee to decide, is that we recommend a review of the key performance indicators at the end of the year, because there are still some gaps, and there was a question on whether they are actually targets and that they can be measured, because if that isn't the case, maybe there is not a worth in, there's no worth in actually having a number down that you can't then measure and take any action against. And so there were some TC1, 2, TC2, 7 and 8 as part of that review. And we hope the full scrutiny committee would just endorse the fact that we take that opportunity at the end of the period, given this is a new set of indicators, and that we are all learning against the current plan as to how they work and the meaning of those. So, Chair, that would be the action that we brought to you as scrutiny for you to endorse. And if there's anything else on the minutes that Councillor Cutler or others want to address, that would be helpful.
Councillor, Mrs. Evans, can we come to you for the response that Councillor Horrell just asked for?
Thank you, Chair. If I can just ask Councillor Horrell to just let me know what the response was.
Can you clarify the question you were hoping for the response for this evening, please, Councillor?
Oh, yes, sorry, not the recommendation to scrutiny committee for review. It is here. Let me just call that out for you. 1 second. Response to be given at scrutiny meeting on the 22nd. The general fund revenue summary split up higher than budgeted income from garden waste and car parks, and understanding the contribution of each. So it is the split between garden waste and car parks, and that was due to be updated here. But I've noticed Mrs. Keys has just slipped out, but maybe Councillor Todd or Cutler will be able to answer that. Thank you.
Yeah, we updated.
1 moment, Councillor Todd, please.
Sorry?
The chair hasn't come to you yet. 1 moment, please.
I do.
Mrs. Evans, coming to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, I do have the question was, as you said, however, slightly higher than budgeted income, and you asked what that split was. And the split is 190k. Collectively, it was 100k for car parking income and 90k for the garden waste fees.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Todd, did you still wish to speak?
I was just going to clarify that you just saw the recommendation on the second page of the general fund, which adjusted car park service income, car park income by £100,000 and garden waste service income by £90,000. You actually just agreed the split, or you scrutinised the split about 20 minutes ago.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Councillor Wallace, would you like to come forwards and ask your questions? Again, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
And hopefully I won't need it all, but I shouldn't do. Right, I just had a few questions on particularly around the carbon neutrality programme. Data for the carbon neutrality is still inconsistent between different sections of the report. For example, on page 144, I can pass you these details afterwards. The council's carbon emission target for 22-23 is shown as 1873 tonnes. On page 129, it's 3750 tonnes. So we need to understand what's correct there. Please, secondly, can I request access to the minutes from the council's carbon neutrality board, the initiative for a utility scale renewable energy project, which the cabinet's spoken about at public meetings and is referenced in the latest council performance reports. On page
Councillor Wallace, can I ask that you move the microphone maybe closer to you? It's just
sorry.
we're not getting the clap we need at the back here.
Sorry, is that better? Okay, sorry. Yeah, second point is around, can I request access to the minutes from the council's carbon neutrality board, the initiative for the utility scale renewable energy project, which the cabinet has spoken about at public meetings and is referenced in the latest council performance reports. Talks about £2.6 million project for solar canopies, has not gone before any council committee. So I'm assuming that the plan has been, well, the project has been reviewed and agreed at the carbon neutrality board. Therefore, my understanding is that from the constitution, the minutes should be available to members. So I'd like to request those, please. On this,
sorry, it's Councillor Wallace is asking for the minutes of the carbon neutrality board.
Yes, in respect of a particular project though, sorry,
Yes.
Councillor Wallace, which project?
The solar energy, renewable energy project.
There has been no decision made regarding the progress of a solar energy project at this time. It's still under development. And I believe you have asked for the minutes before, and I think you've been advised that it's policy under development and that when there is a report to be made about a project, it will be brought through the process. But there is no decision been made to progress any solar project at this time. I can assure you of that.
Okay, so I have requested those. I still haven't had an answer actually to my request. I haven't had a formal answer. And secondly, how we bid for funding, we've clearly bid for, I mean, the report says we bid for funding for this.
Yes, the council routinely will bid for funding if it's exploring a particular project for a particular theme. But as I just explained with Councillor Pett, we have a project management methodology. So we may be at a business justification stage case with that particular project, but no decision has been made to proceed with the solar project at this time. I can assure you of that.
Okay, thank you. Right, so next point is related to that actually. There seems to be some confusion about whether the funding bid was successful. On page 132 it says the bid's been submitted and it's marked green. On page 138 it says the bid was unsuccessful and the project's marked amber. So I'm looking for some clarification there as to whether it's happened there. Next point, previously quarterly reports have referenced Hampshire County Council carbon assessment tool that will be was planned to be used in future council processing reports. This hasn't been referenced in this current report. So I was wondering if there's still a plan to use this tool. Yeah, I've raised that several times, so I'm still waiting for an answer on that one. Yeah, going forward, there still appears to be a lot, several cases of duplication and potentially double counting between different sections of the report, which obviously increases the chance of errors, which I've picked up a couple today. Whilst improvements have been made overall to the quarterly report, and don't get me wrong, I've seen some really good improvements in my time here. I think there's still it still feels longer than necessary, and it feels like there could still opportunity to simplify it and make it a bit efficient.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Who would like to respond to Councillor Wallace's questions? Councillor Cutler?
Given that all these questions are around the the detail of the carbon report, I could take the questions away if I have them in writing, and we'll follow them up. Councillor Todd may know a little more on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the Chief Executive has highlighted how things work in terms of our decision-making process. A reference to renewable energy generation can, for example, be found on page 25 for the Carbon Neutrality Action Plan, which has been agreed by Cabinet and followed on from a decision by Council to support the Council plan, which includes a reference to the Carbon Neutrality Action Plan. So it has actually been through the Council's governance processes, and the fact that it's being worked on is something that's in the public domain and available for other people to scrutinise. In terms of the specific point about making the report simpler and more transparent, I think that's very definitely something that we would want to look at in terms of process. And I agree with you that this is something that we must continuously be seeking to improve in order to improve our transparency and openness to scrutiny.
Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Wallace. If you could provide details regarding the contradictions in the report, that would be much appreciated. You might have spotted things that the officers and Cabinet haven't. Okay, coming round the table, do we have any other questions on this? No, any debate on this? No. So I would like to thank, as always, the performance panel for your really detailed, thorough going over of this. It was requested that the Scrutiny Committee notes performance panel met on the 7th of November, notes the verbal update and raises the leader or relevant Cabinet member any issues arising, which have been done. I have noted down here requests for updated performance panel minutes, review of KPIs, can they be measured, are they targets, and Councillor Wallace to provide details regarding contradictions on numbers. Does that pretty much cover it?
Chair, you may want the detail from our panel minutes on the review of indicators, because it's quite specific and helpful there, I think, to everyone. If you picked up 1A from our minutes, sorry, the summary of actions 1A, then that would actually give you the detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horrocks. And so thank you again, and we will move on to the next item. So this is coming on to the determination of a call-in request that was submitted by all opposition members of the council. And I shall pass over to Miss Evans to introduce this, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This, as the Chair has already said, this is a report that deals with quite comprehensively a call-in that was received with regard to the, got the correct paper here. Trying to find the actual detail. Yes, this was a call-in that was looking at the decision with regard to our carbon neutrality action plan. And it's detailed throughout comprehensively within the report. It says what the grounds were, and I've gone through all of those. It gives the details of the 5 members and that the procedure was followed correctly. It's a relatively detailed and robust report. Hopefully all members have read that, and I will just take you to the decision and my conclusion. So on considering the grounds and other matters raised by the 5 members using the call-in procedure, the monitoring officer is satisfied and concludes that all of the grounds and reasons given have been addressed and robustly refuted. And furthermore, the decision called in does not conflict with the budget and policy framework procedure rules or the council's principles of decision making. So that's what, as the monitoring officer, I'm asked to look at. And therefore the request for call-in was not accepted. So it was with regard to the carbon neutrality roadmap action plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Evans. So the recommendation here is that we note the contents of this report. Does anybody have any comments, questions or debates before we agree to note the report? Councillor Horrell.
Chair, thank you. I hear the and note the response of the monitoring officer, but I think there was a unanimous view of the opposition councillors that we had no scrutiny on this particular important document. The briefing for councillors came post the decision by Cabinet, and the report did not include the latest data that is available, and we still haven't seen that. And in fact, you'll note, I'm sure, as an administration, that this document continues to be of high interest to people because of the nature of it and what it hopes to deliver, and therefore people are keen, councillors are keen to be involved. And I welcome the Councillor Todd's comment about transparency, because I think this is an example where the hurdle was not passed on transparency with this, and indeed had those other opportunities been given to councillors, there would be much more support, a cohesive position for this council on this important document, and we would all be in a better place. So I hope that there are lessons learned despite the failure of the call-in based on the monitoring officer's assessment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell, and I very much agree. There should be lessons learnt from this, even though the call-in was unsuccessful. And I hope that Councillor Todd has taken that on board and feels suitably reprimanded. Councillor Todd.
Obviously, I would. It is not a matter for the administration to interfere in the running of scrutiny and the policy committees, which are a matter for those chairs and those committees to govern themselves. And that's an important principle in terms of how we do things. I am very confident that our officers ensure that we make our decisions on a legally sound basis. That said, I am always keen to find ways of better coordinating our work. And as you know, I believe it's been agreed between the policy and scrutiny chairs that there will be better. Firstly, we will. We're very keen. I am keen that we provide, as far as possible, as much forward transparency as possible in terms of when decisions can be taken. I'm keen that we work collaboratively, collectively between the committee chairs and the scrutiny committee to make sure that policy issues of interest are properly looked at and well scrutinised. As you know, I've always been of the view that good scrutiny leads to better decision making, and so I'm very happy to do whatever is needed to ensure that we continue to improve how we do that.
Thank you, councillor Todd. Ms Seven.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just say, and on page 191, and as I've already said and summed up, I was satisfied with regard to how that decision was made, and it's important that I do strengthen that. But also page 191, there is a summary of the refreshed carbon neutrality action plan and exactly where that went. So different presentations that took place, updating internal and external stakeholder engagement as well. So just to bring members' attention to that. But again, just reminding the committee that I was satisfied that the decision was taken lawfully and legally. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Sevens. Just because a decision is legal and lawful doesn't make it necessarily the best process. So I just think we need to be mindful of that. Are we all happy as a committee to note this call-in response? Okay, thank you. So moving on to item 10 on the agenda, to note the work programme for 22-23. Are we all happy to note that? Councillor Horrell.
Well, Chair, picking up on the discussion we've just had, are we clear then that there are no papers for the Scrutiny Committee pre-PERDA that relate to the local plan, regeneration projects, CWR? I don't see any of those on here. Maybe there's no decision to be made on them of any note, but just a couple of examples of significant projects for this council. I'm just questioning where we are, and should we be mindful of that, or are we assuming that if there are any significant decisions, or key decisions, that they will be arranged around a separate meeting? Just to clarify, Chair, the position going forward, because otherwise all of the things on our work plan are just the standard items, but we don't have any other key decisions, it seems, before PERDA.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Just to clarify, this is the work programme as it looks currently as of today at this meeting. The monitoring officer, the chief executive, and I, as chair of this committee, will be always looking at our pre-scrutiny meetings, at the agenda, what the upcoming key decisions are, and including the key decisions as necessary. There might be a CWR update. It might be in January, it might be later. If there is a significant decision coming up on CWR, there will be a special meeting called and agreed. So this is a moving beast. This is what's fixed for the rest of the municipal year. Other items may be included on it, depending on the order of business as we go forward in the council.
Thank you, Chair. I'm encouraged to hear that there is flexibility and the agenda may change.
Thank you. So we're happy to note this. The forward plan, the chief executive, the monitoring officer, and I had a look through at the upcoming items of business through to the end of January and what might be coming in February. We looked at this forward plan. We agreed that there were no key decisions that warranted scrutiny at that time to be added to tonight's agenda. And of course, that will continue to be reviewed. So are we happy to note the current forward plan, which of course is also a moving beast? Councillor Horrell.
Chair, I noticed there was a late addition to the forward plan and the disposal of a property. Is that property in the general fund or is it in the HRA as part of any of the disposals that we've perhaps been talking about in some of our budget processes earlier this evening? If that could just be clarified, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Todd.
I believe it's in the general fund. Certainly been. We will double check. We will make it clear when we come to the decision. So.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. You wanted to speak.
Yes, I just wanted to, for absolute transparency, my decision day on the 4th of December will also include a decision on a grant potentially to Winchester Cathedral for a Jane Austen statue. So that's been added to there as well. It will be on the agenda, which is published tomorrow, I think.
Thank you, councillor Cutler. Do we have any more comments on this forward plan? Councillor Reach.
Thank you. Just a very pedantic point on section A, page 201. Number 1, the bus contract renewal. It says town wards, but I think Badge Farm Oliver's Battery has 4 park and ride stops in it as well. So it's a bit wider than just the town wards.
Thank you, councillor Reach.
I have to be corrected by councillor Lemming, who seems incredulous.
Can you just clarify what you mean by that?
It says wards affected, it says town wards, but there are stops in the car park itself, which I think is in your ward, and then at Pit Park and Ride as well. I think there are 2 stops there, which probably fall in your ward. You would know better, of course.
I think so. Because it only goes from the Park and Ride up to Pit Park, Park and Ride, and that's not in our ward.
We can check, councillor Reach.
Is that discussion concluded? Okay. Councillor Horror.
I think it's the same point that councillor Reach has just made. Is the property in Eastgate Street might be in St Michael's, but if it's a general fund, it's a council asset, is it not? So the asset value is back to, it impacts the whole council, even though physically it might be in St Michael's. If we dispose, that goes into the general fund, if that's where it belongs.
I can just clarify, because I've just looked up a paper that I've received on it, that is a freehold asset of the general fund.
Can I assist, Chair? This is obviously the forward plan of key decisions, and as members will know, there are different criteria that make something a key decision, and one of those is that it affects more than 2 wards. But usually the decision that tips something into a key decision here is absolutely the financial element. So that 3rd column along, where it's expenditure over 250, on all of those, it's showing that is the trigger for the key decision. So we desperately do try and get the wards right. We wouldn't normally list a property disposal as all wards, because I mean it would hit the financial criteria before anything else. I think it's just a helpful location finder, to be fair.
Thank you. Okay, so we're happy to note this, and we're aware that there is that item to be added as per councillor Cutler. So thank you for that, and that the Chief Executive Monitoring Officer and I will continue to look at the forward plans and we are going to look further out into the future moving forward, so that we include the real key decisions at scrutiny and don't miss the ones that fall between scrutiny meetings. So we have that agreement. Anyway, so that concludes our items of business this evening. We've done it in really good time. I can get home for our liberty. Have a good evening. Thank you.